Hi guys, welcome to my Redux version of Install to Combat Ray. The first attempt at this was a little convoluted, so this will hopefully be about an hour long once I finish editing and condensing it. So first things first, for installing it, you need to download the full installer, BMS 4.33U3, and also the incremental installers U2 and U3. So these can all be available through torrent. And one note for Falcon BMS 4.33 is that you need a full install of Falcon 4.0. So when you finally have that done, you'll open up the U1 zip folder. There'll be an application there and you'll create a U1 setup folder. You want to keep this separate from your install and do not delete this folder because we used it in case there's any updates like a U4. So after you have all of this, the setup folder, you run U2 and U3 and you reference the setup folder. In the setup folder you'll see a setup. You can open it up, run, then we'll first verify, which can take a little while depending on how fast your hard drive is. But it will show what you currently have installed and what you have currently downloaded. Initially you will have nothing on currently installed and everything on downloaded. You pretty much hit next and then you install it. So I'm just going to wait for this to verify and then we'll go on to the actual game itself. So it's a relatively straightforward process for installation. It can be a little convoluted sometimes, but make sure you have a copy of Falcon 4.0. So since I already have them installed, I can't highlight them. But for when you're installing these, you can highlight and next, and then select these to install, and then install them. So straightforward installation process. So going to go ahead and close all of this down and start up Falcon BMS. So first off, you'll want to go in setup. Normally when you log in you'll get blasted by sound, which is this music, so I just have it all the way turned down. Then pretty much I've left this as the recommended settings. So player voice, that will be when you're in pit and you fire, it will actually vocalize what you are doing. UI radio chatter will have radio chat when you're in 2D. Personally I don't like it, so I turn it off. Internal sounds outside of cockpit, pretty much what it implies. If you're doing external views, you'll get sounds from your cockpit. Simulation, you want all of these set to max, so if we go through all of this, these are just default settings. Realism rating is how realistic is set. Accurate for all of these, so it's pretty much all what you need. Smart scaling will make objects a bit bigger at range, so it's easier to spot closer to in real life because of all the pixels. It's not easy to represent that on how it is in real life. Then make sure your HDMI file, which is used with TAC-View on doing flight review, if you want to use that, set that to 1000, otherwise you'll have a ton of small ones. Graphics, assuming that you have a decent computer, you should be able to max out all of this. Same with turn with all these on, and now on to controls. So I have a Warthog, but you don't need a Warthog to do this. But if you have multiple devices, like how I have a Warthog with the throttle and rudders all set separately, you want to set the controller to joystick. So first off, we're going to go into advanced for all the axes. So field of view, this is essentially a zoom function on how you can zoom in and out if you need to. flight control drop down menus on setting these. So this is just what I personally have set up, which I can attach a link to my profile in the description down below. So pretty much all of these are self-explanatory. If you only have one throttle axis, make sure it's set to throttle, and similar for the brakes. Personally, I have a small dead zone, but other than that, I don't use any saturation because I personally prefer one-to-one motion. Avionics control, if you're using a Warthog, this is what I suggest using. So cursor is essentially going to be your radar cursor. So in TGP slew, then radar elevation will change where your radar is looking in terms of altitude, which I will go over that further detail when discuss the radar. So if you have additional axis, you can bind something to that. Then audio control, this is only if you're doing your own pit build, which some people have extreme builds for that. So on to controls themselves. So most of these controls you don't really need to bind because you can actually click them in pit. So first things first, we're just going to scroll all the way down till we reach TQS, which is the throttle quadrant system. So that will be 2.19. So if you're doing multiplayer, I would just having all the comms switch. So UHF or uniform, that will be for communicating across different flights. VHF or Victor for within your flight. Then IFF out and IFF in, I always get them confused. If I remember correctly, IFF in, if you hit that with no, let me get this straight. IFF out, that will set up your data link. IFF in will send data to other flights. So if you want to send a target, you can use that. Man range up and down, this is your zoom in and out for your TGP. Yeah, uncage for the manual range knob. That will uncage your Mavericks, Sidewinders, and other IR missiles. So all of these are important to bind. Dogfight override, medium range missile override, and medium range missile / dogfight cancel. If you can only do one of these, I would do dogfight override. That's currently all that I have binded. But again, it's up to personal preference. Always have dogfight override. So if you ever get bounced by like a MiG-29, you can quickly hit the switch, go air to air, and shoot down MiG-29s. And this is the only mode that you can actually use your gun in air to air. Speed brake, as the name implies, there's small speed brakes by the engine in the back of the F-16. So also very important to bind. Radar cursor. If you did not bind anything for the axis on your cursor when we did advance, then you need to bind something here. Cursor enable, cursor 0, I find not necessary to bind those. Idle detent, just remember that's Alt-I, this is used for startup. And then antenna tilt up and tilt down. If you don't have it under advance, I would recommend buying this. So right now I have that set for my China hat on my throttle. So, it's very important. But pretty much all these other switches you don't really need to bind, but once you get more and more experience, you will want to bind them to make your life easier. So I will not tell you on how to bind these because it's all up to personal preference. Stick is next, which is 5.11. So for stick, you want pretty much everything here bound. TMS is your target management switch. You use this for locking up to targets. DMS is your display management switch to manage your displays and sensor of interest. So if you're familiar with the A10C, and then trim up and trim down. If you can only afford to have two, then I would suggest having trim left and trim right, because you will get asymmetric loadouts time from time. First and second trigger detent. The first trigger detent is for your laser if you're doing like body lasing. Second trigger detent is for actually shooting your gun. Weapon release, name implies exactly what it does. Nose wheel steering, aerial refueling disconnect, missile step switch. Also important to bind. Pinky switch, you only need to bind one of these. And so this is for toggling field of view and other minor functions. Paddle switch, you hold it and it will turn off your autopilot if you're doing the terrain following radar, which I will not be covering in this tutorial, but it's just good to have. So this is the quick and dirty of installing and binding your controls. One quick thing before going on to data cartridge and other setup is your logbook. So you can set your call sign, which is how it will show up when you are actually in game. Pilot, that will just be what you pilot when you select the slot. And if you want to add a password, you can. I've never used it since it's in my own computer. You can select different voice, which is for like when you use the pilot voice. And then you can see what mels and all your statistics. So no need to do anything, just make sure you change your call sign and pilot, and that's all you need. So that's essentially quick and dirty for our logbook, and now we're going to go to data cartridge. So before jumping in the pit and doing cold start, I'm going to do a brief overview of the data cartridge. It's not going to be as in-depth as my dedicated data cartridge video, but I'll just give you basics on how to get started with it. So targets, this is not going to be covered. It's for bombing precision points. EWS is for setting up chaff and flare programs. So program 1 is associated with CMS forward, then 6 is associated with CMS left. So how I currently have it set up is program 6 will dispense 1 flare, and then program 1 will dispense 1 chaff. So it just makes it a quick, easy reminder for me on how to set this up. Then for doing your jammer, for when you actually have to do that, CMS aft will turn it on, and then CMS right will turn it off. So this is all personal preference. You can start using what I have, and then as you get more experience, change it to your personal needs. For our modes, this is what controls your MFDs. So your MFD 1 is to your right, and the MFD 2 is to the left. So this is just what I currently have set up, which I'll just go through a basic rundown of how this works. Is that you just select which MFD you want, then current will show where it starts out. So this is my left MFD. It starts off with the FCR, flight control system, and terrain following radar. Then on my second MFD, I have my SMS, which is stores management display. I'm not sure what SMS actually stands for, to be honest. HSD, your navigation page. TGP, targeting pod. So this is just my personal setup, which I'll just go through it. So without any voice, so you can just follow along. Just pause at any points if you want, just copy this down. So nav master mode, MFD1, FCR, FCLCS, TFR. MFD2 is SMS, HSD, TGP, starts on the secondary. Going to air to ground, FCR, SMS, HSD. Then weapon, this is for when you have Mavericks or Harms. TGP, HAD, harm acquisition display. This is for when you have the HTS pod. And then I have it starting on the TGP. Then for air-to-air, similar to the nav setup. So it's pretty much identical as nav setup, so if I switch air-to-air mode, it will be identical. Except for it will start with the SMS page over the HSD page. Then the override, since I just use Dogfight override, it's designed to be as simplified as possible, and it's identical to my air-to-air mode. So make sure you save these as you go, because otherwise you'll potentially lose them. And do not hit reset, because you'll have to reset everything. So comms, this is where you can set your radio channels. So for doing taking off from tower, so we're taking off from Kunsan Air Base. It's standard practice to set tower to 15, so you just do that to uniform 15, Jeff 15, then just hit set tower, and it will automatically update to display that. Then for VHF or Victor channels, you can just select which channel you want to be on. So these are all default. Resetting will set these back to default, but again, that resets all your modes. So this is a quick and dirty for the data cartridge, and make sure you set tower before you embark on a cold start. So that's a quick and dirty. Hi guys, welcome to the startup procedure for the F-16. So one thing that you will notice is chocks in place. That is something that we will have to clear with tower and get that removed, since that's one of the important reasons why to have your tower. So let's get this started. First you want to turn on the fuel. Next, battery power. So this switch right here. Then air source to norm. The F-16 has very sensitive electronics, and you can burn them by not with that off. So I'm now going to close the canopy because it's going to get a little loud with the engine starting up. And we're also going to turn on our lights using the lighting panel right here. So you go over here and then right click it to go to start 2. Hold it for about 3 seconds and it will stick in place. Then we need to watch our RPM gauge right here. So we need to wait for RPM to reach about 25 before pressing the idle detent, which by default it's Alt-I, which that is how I have it. I don't have it bound to anything else, so just waiting for it to spool up. Then once this turns up all the way, some of the other systems will start turning on, and as you see, with the idle detent pressed, it slowly is increasing to idle RPM. So caution lights start to go off. And just need to wait a few more moments and then things will start kicking up. So these are right now showing off. Now they're on. So next thing we're going to do is turn off GPS, MFDs, upfront controller, and start aligning the navigation system. And while we're still looking over here, we're going to turn on the 2 hard points, which are used for your targeting pod or in HTS. Turn on the FCR, and one habit that I've gone into is using the radar altimeter, so I have that set right now to standby. If you need to have additional, like in a dark situation, you can turn on a floodlight using that. And your actual instrument light's right there in case you're doing like a night operation. So first things first, we have all of these faults. So we're just going to clear those off by going to the test page and then hitting clear. So right now the FCR is booting up, and we have nothing displayed here, and this is not the data cartridge I said earlier. So I'm just going to go to DTE, then hit load. So this will automatically set up for your MFDs, and you'll see how these changed. So go and turn on the symbology for the HUD. So we're right now just waiting for navigation to align. So we'll be fully aligned when it says 4.0 over 0.8. So for the newer blocks, it takes about 4 minutes for this alignment process. But for the older blocks, like block 30s and older, it will take about 8 minutes. So while that is going on, I'm going to turn on the radios. So right here. So these are the volume dials. You can actually adjust them. And that's on right now. So, and I'm going to switch it to the upfront controller. Backup you will just manually set right here, but upfront controller, you now have it set to this. Then while we're down here, we're going to turn the ECM on, so this will essentially keep it warm up for use in a mission. Turn on our countermeasures panel. Set that to semi. And landing and taxi light. And we're going to just keep scrolling around. So this is your RWR, so now it's not powered on, so we can power on using this button right here. So system power, so now it's on. And now we'll need to wait for it to do some initialization procedures before we can actually use it. So I'm just out of habit going to expand this to 30 miles. So this is just showing on how far the dimensions of the box are, if I remember correctly. So the radar is almost warmed up to go. So just watch out. Now the fire control radio is ready. It's on standby, and then we're going to move it to CRM, which is the default mode. And we're going to switch it to control, just to check off, and then back. So now the main thing that we are waiting for is waiting for INS to align, so there's nothing else that we need to really worry about except for INS, so just going through everything. And then it's important to arm your ejection seat, otherwise you won't be able to eject, which it's just Control E to eject. So we're almost ready to taxi. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the parking brake right here, and go to tower, and request the wheel chocks to be removed. Well, it's probably not set on the default, so I need to double check once it's fully aligned. So it's now 4.0 over 2.0. Then it's now ready. So we're now aligned. And then we can go over here and set that to nav. And once we're here, hit return. Then we can mess with this, and like I said, was on uniform 1.5, so I'm just going to scroll up to uniform 1.5 and request trucks to be removed. And then we can taxi. So I'm going to go ahead and request taxi.
Taxi, runway 18. Hold short.
So I'm going to remove the parking brake, and one thing to watch out at idle power with lighter loadouts, like I just have a small assortment of air-to-air weapons on this loadout, is that it will taxi on idle power. So usually I don't do much more than that. Don't forget to turn on your nose wheel steering, and then you can taxi out. So ATC does actually work fairly well for the most part in BMS, so you can accurately follow their directions. So just going to taxi the runway and do takeoff. So in the meantime, while we're doing that, I'm going to discuss flying it. For the most part, flying the F-16 is relatively easy. there's an advanced fly-by-wire system. Also, now this is ready to go. Oh, you can hit handoff, and now we'll actually get other radars popping up. If we don't hit handoff, which I've forgotten many times, nothing will show up on your RWR and you'll be blind with that. So back to flying the F-16. F-16 is relatively simple to fly. With the fly-by-wire system, it will try to prevent you from doing any situations causing loss of control. So it is to keep your airspeed while flying over 200 knots, otherwise you have a higher chance of stalling. But for landing and takeoff, depending on your load, it's between 160 knots and 180 knots for takeoff and landing. So obviously lighter loads can use the smaller takeoff speed. The larger ones are for heavier air-to-ground loadouts. So it's relatively simple. I'm just going to twist this knob to set the altimeter to 0. So it's now accurate to QFE, which represents local pressure on the airfield. And like I said earlier, I'm right now doing idle power, and you can see this is taxiing rather quickly. The F-16 is a very light jet and doesn't need much to get going. So go ahead and taxi over here. Hold brakes. And since this is just a TE, I'm the only aircraft flying this, so I can go ahead and take off. So one thing to be careful about when you're taking off for the first few times is don't pull on the stick too hard, otherwise you have a strong potential of having a tail strike. So lined up with the runway, brakes, turning off nose wheel steering, then you go full gate, which it's full afterburner. So we don't get airspeed indicator until 60, and that's when your rudder will actually gain effectiveness. So we're passing through 160, pull back on the stick gently,
Cowboy 1-1, Tucson Tower. Resume all
and raise your
navigation.
landing gear, which by default it's G. But if you want to use handle and pit, it's right here. So my typical habit is to use afterburner until I'm past 350 knots. So onwards to navigation, which is relatively simple. So I'm going to go ahead and hit up on this and select steer point. Then hit this rocker to go up to steer 2. Then it's simple, easy. Follow the tadpole on your heads-up display and match that with your flight path indicator, and then that will direct you in the direction that you need to do to follow your flight plan. So it's relatively simple to navigate with, nothing too fancy. Then other useful indicators, this right here is your distance to the steer point. This is your estimated time en route until you reach the steer point. So as you change speed, it will obviously slowly accelerate, so it's right now going a little faster than real time. But if I pull back on the throttle, see the time starts clicking up or holding steady. So it's an easy select the steer point you want to go to, so like in this case 4. Roll to it, and then just pull in the direction until you line up the tadpole with the flight path marker. So the diamond that you see on the bottom is a physical ground representation of where the waypoint is, and that's quick and dirty of takeoff, startup, and simple navigation. So next we're going to go over landing the F-16. It's relatively simple to do, but since the jet is so light and aerodynamic, it is hard to lose speed, so one key thing is to pop out your speed brakes, which you can see an input indicator right here. The 9 white dots indicate that the speed brake is open and will say closed when you have it closed. So I'm beginning a descent, and we'll be landing on runway 18. So right here is your alpha or angle of attack indicator. So typical guidance for people is to have the circle shown.
Altitude.
But I don't always follow that, so I'll be trying my best to do that for this video to show you. So we're going to go ahead and hit T for tower, then request autonomous approach.
Good morning, Cowboy. 1, tuna sound approach. Runway 18, welcome back.
So that will allow us to navigate our own cells to land. If you hit request ATC vectors, tower will give you specific directions on where to go for landing, and will guide you in to fit with the pattern, because sometimes there's a lot of jets landing in the area, so it's sometimes a safer option to do that. And as you can see, we've gone to 263 knots, and we're still on nosedive with the speed brake all the way out. So it slows down very slowly, so it's good to try to cut as much speed as possible before landing. Max safe gear speed out is 275, but typically I will lower my gear around 200 knots as I'm passing to my landing speed. Since this is such a light jet, I'm probably going to land around 165. So I'm keeping the speed brake open. Just cut the speed down. Line myself up with the runway. So I'm just right now trying to descend, because a good descent angle is about 2.5 degrees or so for landing the F-16. So there you go. You're gonna level off, somewhat level off here. Get some more speed out.
Good morning, Cowboy. 1-1, tuna sound tower. Clear for landing. Runway 18,
I'm actually
jet
going to
gear
go
down.
ahead and lower my landing gear, because that'll increase drag and drop my speed. And as you can see, the HUD changed. So this is more of landing, and that right there is 2.5 degrees I was talking about. So I'm just going to lower that until it gets to the end of the runway. And then there we go, we have 165. Now I'm a little low on angle of attack. And then there we go. A little low on airspeed, but that's okay because of how light the aircraft is. Then gently touch down. Then opening the air brakes to slow down. And one thing about the F-16 is you can keep a nose up attitude to reduce speed and just air brake versus putting the extra pressure on the brakes. But since we're passing this 2 marker, I'm going to go ahead and hit the brakes, which by default it's K, but I'm just using toe brakes on my rudder pals. So coming to stop, enable nose wheel steering, and then taxi off. So you don't have to do the complete shut-off procedure, so that's something unnecessary in my opinion, so I'm going to go ahead and hit escape and then in mission. So this is a quick and dirty of landing. So now we're going over the basics of air-to-air. I'm not the best resource for air-to-air combat, so I'm just going to be covering this as best I can. So this right here is the dogfight mode, and I have it set to match play, so once all the enemy aircraft down, everyone will respawn and reset. Going to set the distance to 40 nautical miles initially. And for the targets, it's going to be 2 Tu-95 Bear bombers, and we'll be flying a F-16 Block 52. So you can adjust these sliders for amount of missiles. You can have unrealistic numbers, but I'm just going to stick with 2 radar missiles and 2 all-aspect IR missiles. In fact, let's actually make this 3 Bear bombers. So 2 of them I'll shoot down with radar, and then the third one I will hit with the all-aspect IR missile, which is the AIM-9X. So we'll be 4 miles apart initially, and at Angels 1-6. So I'm going to go ahead and commit. Alright, so we're flying to target. To use your air-to-air weapons first, you need to hit AA, which is obviously air-to-air mode. And now I'm going to hit Shift P to go freeze. So this way I can still interact with my cockpit, but I will not be moving. So as you can see, there's one contact right here, but if you hit your pinky switch, you can actually zoom in. So I'm going to go and freeze it. And there's 2 kinds of locks, soft lock and a hard lock. So soft lock, the enemy will not know that you're locking onto them, but hard lock, they will be aware of your presence. So for AMRAAMs, you just need to do a soft lock, and that's all it needs for initial guidance. So going over some symbology on the HUD and the radar, so you can see there's 2 parallels. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it again. Right here is your closure rate in knots, so we're closing right now at 870 knots. Up here is the max range that you can fire a missile, and at the current airspeed, if they were to turn around and try to run, the missile will barely catch up with them. So it's not advisable, but that's essentially your max effective range. This box right here represents no escape range, where you pretty much almost have a guaranteed hit, but going defensive and defensive maneuvers can still break the missile. So most of the time when I shoot AMRAAMs, I typically shoot it about just outside of no escape range. So I'm going to go ahead and unfreeze and start closing the distance. And one advantage with soft locking, you can lock up multiple different targets. So with dogfighting mode, they haven't really separated, so I can't easily demonstrate that right now. But as you can see, we're closing in. Sometimes with hard locking, you can actually get target identification. But in campaign situations, you will often need target identification. So you do that as hit Q for AWACS, then hit declare. So
1-1, Sentry 1, contact confirmed hostile. ID this.
So that will tell you what type of aircraft or whether it's friendly or not. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause. Soft lock. then close the distance some. So I'm just going to wait until this says 10 m, which is miles. So as you can see, it's a fairly fast closure rate, and you can see the bombers. They look like they're glitching together, but that's simply due to the fact of the enlarged models with the smart scaling. So now it's 10 miles, and I'm going to fire a missile. So I fired a missile. You can see it right here. You can see the screen has the bear bomber as purple, which indicates that there's a missile inbound on it, but it's not self-guiding. So it will turn red once the missile goes pitbull, which means the radar on the missile itself is guiding it on target. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. It's going in. And then the circle will flash once you're in no escape range. Now the missile went pitbull. So you can see the bomber is right now going defensive to try to dodge it, but it's probably not going to dodge it since it's a bear bomber. So now we're going to lock up, and you can see hit and splash. So we're going to fire again on another one. And now we have the Sidewinder 10. So that growl is the Sidewinder, or essentially trying to track a target. And that right there is where the sensor's looking. But we can't shoot at this mode. So going to adjust my antenna elevation down. If I try to hit weapon release, I can't fire. So if you go to your SMS page right here, right now it says warm. You need to cool the seeker head for it to have a good lock, because heat-seeking missiles track heat, so they need to be, the seeker heads need to be cooled before you can fire on them. So I'm going to go ahead and change it into cool, and you'll see ready. So that means you can actually fire the missile, and you can actually hear the tone shift change. And then you can just fire by hitting pickle. There goes the missile. And then hit. So sometimes for larger targets such as this, it takes multiple attacks. But you can see this cone right here is where it's looking, so you can also fire it without radar. The missile is tracking. Then it hits. So the damage models are very simplistic in Falcon BMS, and that's mostly due to the age. So you got that bomber. And the other one is still flying somehow, even though it took a direct hit from airmen. So next we're going to do basics on dogfighting. So I am far from the expert in dogfighting, so can probably direct you to some other people that would be better resources on that.
You really slaughtered those whiskey deltas.
But I will do my best. So I'm going to go ahead and delete. Then change this aircraft to, let's make this a MiG-29A. No missiles, unlimited guns, and close the distance. So, key thing to remember for one dogfighting is corner speed. You don't get the best performance when turn fighting with F-16 if you pull back as hard as you can. The corner speed is the best rate of turn you can get. So for the F-16, that's going to be about 300 to 400 knots. If you drop much below that, you'll be wasting energy and not have the best results when dogfighting. So first things first, you're going to go freeze it again. You need to switch to dogfight mode. So this will completely clear up your HUD and make it easier to see beyond it. So you can see the MiG-29 in the distance right there. This is your gun cross, and then this is your gun funnel. This is simplistic for your airspeed, bullseye location, and altitude. So I'm going to go ahead unpause it. So it says no radar, but if you hit TMS up, you'll get a cross, and then it will lock whatever you look at. So we're going in head on. Go ahead and switch to afterburner. Let's get this MiG-29. So I'm pulling down below it. So sometimes the RWR will carry over from previous. So now I'm pulling back on the power just to try to keep my speed up. But I've already lost a lot of speed, so but they have as well. Gonna cross over them. Then you'll see the circle, and that's where you'll need to aim to hit the enemy target. So gonna go ahead and try to get that on. Then the second trigger detent is what shoots. So splash. So I'm gonna just do one more roundabout for this. So as this is match play, it will automatically respawn like it is doing right now. Switch to dogfight mode. TMS up for radar. Then lock the target. So you still get the closure rate, and you will also be able to use missiles in this mode. But it's mostly useful for using guns, and it's the only mode that you can use guns in air-to-air combat. So you can see diving away and trying to pull on him. So this is just recruit AI, so it's relatively simplistic. But you can test yourself with the harder AI skills. So get lock. Sometimes it glitches out like that, so you just hit TMS down to undo it. But for me personally, I often just use the gun cross up at the top, right here, to aim, versus actually using the radar. So you can see the circle, and we're getting really slow and stalling out. So that's why you need to keep up your airspeed. Like, there are many great resources online for mastering dogfighting, and I'm very far from the best person to ask on how to get better at this. So as you can see, they're making a dive. And just align the circle with the aircraft. Shoot. Then you'll get hits. So it's as simple as that for dogfighting. But this is just a quick and dirty for it. I'm not the best resource. One great resource is looking at Art of the Kill, which was actually in Falcon 3.0, so I'll include a link to that in the description. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, and we'll move on to air-to-ground weapons. So for the first air-to-ground weapon we'll cover is going to be the AGM-88 HARM, which is an anti-radiation missile, so it's useful for taking out the radar sites of SAMs. So it's AGM-88 in the loadout. This is just a stock TE. So as you can see, we have the HCS, which is a harm targeting in the system or whatever. I'm not the best with knowing these kinds of things, to be honest. So we're going to be using this loadout. And as you can see by this screen right here, you can see PPTs. Those are pre-planned threat points, so you can put those over known threat systems. So you place those by right-clicking, set pre-planned threat point, hit status, and then select what drop-down is. So and then hit accept, and then we'll put a circle around it. So you do that, figure out what type of unit it is by right-clicking, status, and then you can see what type of unit it is by the launchers. So this is an SA2. So by default it already has an SA2 marker on it, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this off because there's already one there. So it's very simple to use the harm. It's just slewing over a cursor and then hitting pickle. So I'm going to go ahead and commit. So waiting for it to load. Well, I accidentally have my gear down. It's a glitch that sometimes happens. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to air to ground mode. First you need power on your harms, which they need to do short bit test. And go to HAD. So with the HAD page you can see all the emitters for ground-based radars. So numbers are the like SA2, SA3, SA5 systems. So you can see there's an SA3. So we can just slew over, TMS up, and then we have it locked. Then like the air-to-air missiles, you have this range indicator.
2 in position.
So you can just use this to determine when you're in range, and then once you're ready, hold down pickle, then it will release. And then the call out for shooting a AGM-88 is Magnum. So now we have a shot off. So it'll be a short flight for it to go, and we can hit shift 7 to get a view of the harm. But sometimes you get a crossover with the search radar and the actual tracking radar, which the tracking radar, search radars are indicated with S. So we can zoom in using the pinky switch, and we can differentiate between the two. So back to harm view, slowly falling back down to Earth. So it guides itself, so once you shoot it's free to turn around because you don't need to do any terminal guidance to it. So SA3 side is going to be up ahead. See if I can see it and point it out before it hits. But some SAM operators will turn their radar off before impact, so it will go stupid and miss. So it's getting close to impact. Go over here. And you see the 3 on the RWR. And it should disappear in a moment or two, assuming that the harm was accurately guided, which apparently it missed, which is very unusual for harm. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it up, shoot another one. So this is much closer, so it should have a higher chance of hitting. It's not always the best indicator based off of this, so it's better to shoot when you're a little closer versus farther away. So, Magnum. Since we have the air-to-ground ordnance away, we can now switch to Cat 1, because Cat 3 protects weapons. And because you can easily break weapons by pulling too hard of a G load. So if we go over to our HSD page, expand out, you can actually see the threat rings. They're yellow when you're outside, but once you're within, they'll actually turn to the color red to indicate that you're within range of them. So it's tracking, and you can see it in the middle of the frame for the target. It'll be about 10 seconds before it impacts. And then you'll see it drop off on both the RWR right here, then see it just dropped off, and also off the head. So this is a quick and dirty for the AGM-88 harm. So for the next zero-to-ground weapon I'll be covering is laser guide bomb. So as you can see, we have 2 laser guide bombs on this wing and 2 more on the other wing. So so before we go into anything, I'm going to go ahead and set this to steer 7, which is the target steer point. I'm going to freeze it. So before you can actually use the laser guide bomb, you need to make sure the laser arm is on. Then the next important set is making sure your laser is actually in combat, which you go to list, miscellaneous, then laser. Then you go down, hit sequence, and it'll actually you hit 5 to switch this to combat. Otherwise, bombs will not track. And you hit return. Now your laser's in combat mode. Hit standby on your TGP page. Then you can go to air to ground mode. So you can see we have a distance look at the facility. Pinky switch toggles between the zoom. We can zoom in. Then if we want to switch to area track mode, so we'll actually target. So let's target this big building right here. Go to point mode. So other modes of the TGP is black hot and TV. So TV has the most zoom, but white hot and black hot will actually detect targets for you, and it's good for detecting like tanks and other ground units. So I'm gonna go ahead and unfreeze it and turn to target.
2 in position.
So you drop laser guide bombs and CCRP, and you see this line. You need to approximately line up your flight path marker with it for best conditions, and it's similar to all of the other weapons in the F-16 that have ranges with them. You have the secured right here, and then this bracket right here will indicate when you can actually release the bomb for it to hit the target. So we're just going to level off and straighten out. So this timer will say how much until a bomb release, but for the first queue is loft queue, so don't worry about that for now. This timer right here is also time until release, so there's a nice parallel between the two, so you can focus on either one that you want. So I'm just going to be focusing on this. One thing to remember is that you need to have this in narrow field of view to actually use the laser. Otherwise, you'll just miss completely. So there's the loft indicator. And now the timer is actually counting down until we can release the weapon normally. So once you're about 3 seconds from drop, hold in pickle. Then it will automatically drop. So by default, there's a 16-second autolays, and you can see the time to impact with that timer right there. So just going to zoom out a little bit.
Vandal 3-2. Request permission to engage.
Now you see the L flashing, that means the laser is active, and it will turn off a few seconds after an estimated bomb impact, just to make sure the bomb hit target. So you'll see it come from the top of the screen. There you go, Shack. So it's relatively easy to use laser guide bombs. They can also be used on moving targets, but you have to remember to keep the target in sight. So if I slew it over to here, make a hard bank, you can actually sometimes cover the sensor like I am right now, and you won't be able to laser target, which it will show up on your HUD as mask, which means that the targeting pod is masked to the target. Now it sees the target again. So LGBs are relatively easy to use. It's pretty much point, shoot, and drop it on target. So this is the quick and dirty of laser guide bombs. So next up is JDAMs, which are GPS guided bombs. So I'll be carrying 4 of those for this mission. So let's go ahead and commit. So one notable difference between JDAMs and laser guide bombs is that JDAMs are fire and forget, so once you release them, you don't have to worry about guiding them at all. So go ahead and zoom in out, and I'm going to go ahead and reference a target steer point, which is steer 5. So going to turn that way. But one key thing to remember to do about your JDAMs is power them on well in advance to target, because if you don't, they won't be properly aligned and won't hit the target. So you can see it's initializing. Now we'll say A10, which is the state of alignment. You can't really effectively hit targets unless you're A4 or closer, but it's recommended to let it do full alignment for the bomb drop. Otherwise, it won't be as accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn. For this mission, I'm going to be hitting the included weapons range. So since we're waiting on this, I'm going to hit caps lock to speed up time to ×4 and slowly get closer to target while allowing this to align. So as you can see, it's slowly counting down. Now it's A04. We could technically release in this condition, but I don't recommend it. So one thing about JDAMs, I recommend using them to hit fixed targets, because you can just simply fire them and then not worry about guiding them anymore, like in the case of laser guide bombs. So going to go ahead and hit caps lock, go out of time warp, go ahead and turn the targeting pod on, and it's very easy to drop them. It's pretty much point and shoot. So targeting pod's turning on. Go to narrow, hit TMS up, and then this will actually specifically track a point. Going to use man range knob to zoom in, and we're going to hit these F4s. So as you can see, we already got a timer counting down. Hold down weapon release. And weapon release. And one thing that you can do is drop multiple in one pass. So if we want to hit, let's say, this helicopter, you can hit that as well, and hit weapon release. So it's very easy to use. And then once you have fired the weapons, you can turn off side, and you can see the targets are here. So there's F4 that I dropped on, and then those are the helicopters. So Now just waiting for them to impact. There's one. And the second one should be here shortly. There's number 2. So that's the quick and dirty for JDAMs. Relatively easy to use. Just find target on TGP, hit weapon release, and then it will hit that target. So make sure you power them on well in advance of the release. Have them display ready, then you'll hit your targets. So that's a quick and dirty of JDAMs. Alright, now since you have a basic introduction to the main classes of weapon, you can do your first campaign. So, in normal Korean theater operations, you have 3 different campaigns. Tiger Spirit, which starts you up with a smaller amount of North Korea and easier to advance. Usually this is considered the easier of the campaigns. Rolling Fire is the standard one, so you'll have, it's essentially simulating a surprise attack by North Korea. Then Iron Fortress is where you're trying to crawl your way back and gain the rest of South Korea. So for this, you'll start by default on the 36th Squadron, but you can also change to different places, so you can do 25th, which are A-10s, and Korea has their own F-16s, so you can just select different airfields and find which one. Typically for starting off, I recommend doing the 36th Squadron. To change the difficulty of the campaign, you just hit challenge rating, then you can change the force ratios, the average skill level, but this right here will change everything by default. So pilot skill, that will be the enemy pilot skills, and then air defense, so that'll be how advanced the air defense units are. So you can just change them. So it's easy enough to do campaign. Just select the campaign you want, choose the difficulty, commit. Then you'll see all the sliders. So these sliders select the different type of targets that you can have, different mission types, and then the packs on how important an area is. So when starting off, I recommend having these set by HQ, which will essentially have an AI set everything for you. Hit OK, then you can start your campaign. So you'll see it starts firing up a bunch of different flights. So the way you join a flight is choose one from the list, then select a slot, and then you'll join that slot. And then you'll see the flight plan. Then you can edit the loadout as needed. So just hit all, and then you just highlight what weapons you want. So I won't be going much in depth on mission profiles for this. So it's pretty much just find one that you want to do. Click the slot. Make sure loadout is good. Hit OK. Then hit takeoff, which I won't do right now because that will speed up time until takeoff. So you can also save your campaigns. So right now I have some campaigns that I'm right now running on my own, but you can create them up with your own titles for setting them. So basic weather, you can select different weather conditions. Again, I'm not going much in depth to this, I'm not very familiar with it. But when you hit takeoff, you'll get 3 different options: ramp, taxiway, or runway. It's pretty much exactly as the name implies, with ramp starting you on the ramp. Taxiway will start you on the taxiway with already started jet, and then runway will have you start on the runway. So that's the basics to running your first campaign. So it's nothing too fancy about it. So by default, when you start off, you won't have everything displayed that I have. So make sure you go over and turn on all of these, because it will actually show everything. So if I turn these off, just see on how much actually disappears. So you want to make sure you have all these highlights so you can get the best situational awareness. Units, again, those will show and disappear. Divisions are the broadest, and then battalions are the most units that you'll see. And then you can see combat units, air defense, or support units. Then you can also go to threat circles and see where the risk is, and see what kind of coverage the enemy has. So it's relatively simple to set up, and that's essentially how you'll start your first campaign. So if you want to do multiplayer, there's a set of ports that you need to forward. Don't remember them offhand, but I'll add those in the description on what ports. Just forward those, then you type in IP to join. So this is just an example that I have set up. As you can see, I have a whole lot. Not going to show those because those are actual people that I will fly with. So you just enter IP. Then for bandwidth, if you're a client, it says 1024. But if you're doing your own server, you just set this to 0, 0, 0, and you'll connect to your own server. Then for connection bandwidth, you want to set that as 70% of your upload speed. And that's pretty much all you need to know for hosting and doing multiplayer games for starting off. IVC is an built-in voice communication, so it's like TeamSpeak, except for has its own filters, and you can actually change channels and talk with people. And it's often the same IP. If you're hosting your own server, it's 127.0.0.1, if I remember correctly. I'll update that in the description if I am wrong. But that's pretty much the start to flying BMS. So hope this helps out, and I hope you have fun flying in the skies over Korea. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know, and I will try to help you out. So good luck with all the endeavors in Falcon BMS. Cheers.